Namaste. I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in beautiful San Diego. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel. Please make sure that you like the video you've just watched and consider making a contribution on our app or on our website. It's really easy to do, and thank you in advance for that support. It does make a difference. Covey did not define the fourth habit as love wins. It certainly is contained. It actually covers everything that could be in habit number 4, which is the habit of think win-win. And so we've been exploring these habits together. We've been exploring the first 3 habits, which are really all about helping us to live from the inside out, which is very much at the heart of our metaphysical, spiritual practice and teaching. The first 3 habits helping us to experience private victories before embarking on public victories. I hope you remember the habits. I hope you're using the habits. That first habit being the habit of being proactive. The second habit, the habit of beginning with the end in mind. And the third habit, the habit of putting first things first. And each week as we've looked at these first 3, the habits of private victories, we've also looked and seen, we've also looked and seen how they really are just a much more general way of speaking of spiritual principles and practices, right? To be proactive is to take responsibility for, to be actively engaged in our lives, to consciously co-create our life, very much at the heart of the habit of beginning with the end in mind. You know, we have in the Old Testament the powerful teaching, where there is no vision, the people perish, right? Where there's no vision, the people perish. What was Moses being given, and what was Moses sharing with his people? He was trying to get them to the promised land. He was giving them a picture, right? He was saying to them, in essence, begin with the end in mind. This is what we're going for. And he painted it as vividly as he possibly could. And in the third habit, to put things first, put first things first, we hear Jesus' words, seek first the kingdom of God, and then all of these other things will be added unto you. And the kingdom of God, not a distant place, not a God in the sky, but the kingdom of God is referring to a certain kind of consciousness, a consciousness of oneness, a consciousness where we really know that we live and move and have our being in God, that we can co-create with the force and the power and the energy of God. And so these first 3 habits deal very much with ourselves individually, with private victories. But just as our mission statement doesn't end with just transforming our own lives and moves us to include that, but to transcend that and be about healing our world. So these habits that begin first with private victories have to extend out into public victories, into a collective good would be another way that we can say it. Covey teaches that mastery of independence, which is really what those first 3 private victory habits are about, mastery of independence, mastery of ourselves, is required before we can have good relationships with others. We have to have a good relationship with ourselves. We have to have a sense of what it is that's important to us. We have to be true to our word. We have to have a sense of integrity. And as we have that, then we can begin to mature and expand in a meaningful way into relationships of interdependence. In this habit of think win-win, Covey emphasizes the importance, the essentialness of trust in relationships. Those who know me well have heard me say many, many times that for me, even more important than love in a relationship is trust. Is trust. I think it is the nitty-gritty of love. The nitty-gritty of love. I find it, and maybe you can relate or not, I find it much easier to fall in love again or to love through difficulties than sometimes to get trust back when trust has been deeply broken. And so I think that Covey is really writing about something incredibly important and foundational to relationships, and that's trust. And trust comes from trustworthiness. And how do we be a trustworthy person? We be a trustworthy person by being true to our word, by making and keeping commitments, by cleaning up our own act, by admitting when we're wrong, even if it may be hard to do so. Just some of the ways that we build trust into our relationships, just some of the ways that we can be a more trustworthy person. He also likens this, this idea of trustworthiness and trust in a relationship as a bank account. Now, you may not like mixing those two, but bear with the metaphor here. He likens it to a bank account. When trust is high in a relationship, it's like there's a lot of money in the bank. And when trust is high in a relationship, if we do kind of mess up a little bit, there's a little more flexibility, a little more room for error. But when trust is low, when the bank account is low, then any sort of mistake feels enormous. Nod your head if you can relate to any of that, right? When you're really in a good place with your significant other and they mess up, it's a lot easier to forgive them, right? A lot easier to just kind of be like Teflon and let it go. But if you're feeling really empty in that primary relationship and something happens, all of a sudden, even if that something isn't really big, how does it feel? It feels really big. Suddenly, we're not like Teflon, we're like Velcro. Isn't that a good visual, right? You know, so when we have pictures like this or words like this that can help us kind of name what it is that we're feeling and how we're responding in life, it can help us to be more aware and more able to move beyond or to grow through those quirks that we all have. So Covey really emphasizes as he gets ready to lay the framework for this idea of what is a win-win philosophy. He says it's got to have trust at the foundation as well. Because remember, we're moving now, transcending from just private victory habits to public victory, interdependent kinds of habits. We've got to be able to trust each other, and we have to be a trustworthy person. This habit requires challenging the belief that in order to win, another must lose. That's big, right? Right? Let me say that again. This habit, the habit that Covey says is a habit of think win-win. This habit requires challenging the belief that in order to win, another must lose. I don't know how it was for you, but the very first time I ever heard that concept, it was mind-boggling to me because I really thought that you either win or you lose. And to be invited into a very different way of imagining, a very different way of thinking, that it doesn't always have to be, and maybe should never really be, win-lose, but that there really is this mindset, this heart set of win-win. And win-win is not the same thing as I lose and you win, right? No. We have a saying in metaphysics, no private good. Say that with me. No private good. And what is meant by that is if it's not good for me, it can't ultimately be ultimately good for you, and vice versa. that there's got to be this collaborative energy, this mutuality, this reciprocity. And actually, if we think about it, this whole concept lives in an idea of an abundance mentality, and we'll get to that a little more deeply here in a minute. But it rests in this abundance mentality. The win-lose philosophy, if you will, is a zero-sum game. It's a belief in scarcity, that I'd better take everything I can get while I can get it because there's going to be a time I can't. And you just have to go fend for yourself, right? This habit requires challenging the belief that in order to win, another must lose. And then Covey, I'm going to name them. You can go back to the book or your Kindle or your Audible and listen again. But he names the different paradigms or the different scenarios that this concept can take. And I really encourage you, if you haven't reread it for a while, to read it again. He says we have win-win, we have win-lose, we have lose-win, we have lose-lose, we have win, and do you remember what the last one is? Because it's a powerful one. No deal. No deal. It's the willingness to just step back and step away if you really can't come in a difficult situation to win-win, then it's okay to just step back and let it go. And let it go. I really appreciate that he emphasizes that win-win is not meant to be a technique. If it's a technique, it falls apart. If it's a technique, it's very, very shallow. It's not so popular now as it was a number of years ago, but I've been in this practice and teaching for a long time now. And there was a period of time where all of these like big, powerful weekend seminars were the popular thing. And people would go away and they'd spend thousands of dollars for these. And it always kind of surprised me because we would give so much of the same teaching and unity and religious science as a gift without that price tag. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. And people would come back and they'd have a whole different language. And language is good. Language is helpful to us. It helps us name, it helps us be able to communicate. But you could almost sense when it was just about the language and it was a technique and not the embodiment of a different way of being. Are you following me? Is it making sense? Covey is saying that win-win is not meant to be a technique. It's not meant to manipulate. It really has at its heart a desire for beneficial good for all parties concerned. Does that not sound spiritual and religious to you? It totally does to me. It totally does to me. Which brings me to how it does connect. This win-win that's really about mutual collective good is at the heart of the golden rule, right? It's simple. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And the golden rule with a diamond at the end, do you remember what that is? Do unto others as you would have others do unto you, and do it first. Win-win. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. The whole teachings of interconnectedness has at its heart win-win, interconnectedness. Not just that you and I are connected, not just that we are our brother's keeper, we are our brother and we are our sister. There's one of us expressing in many different forms, one life, one energy, one power, one presence. But interconnectedness, not just on the human level, but interconnectedness with all of life, with all of nature. If you're interested in the environment and you follow any environmental news or read any environmental white papers or books, you can't help but read and learn about the interconnectedness of the web of life, right? And what's at the heart of that? But that if we don't care for each part of it, we're going to hurt the whole of it. Deeply, deeply spiritual. But Covey put it in language that a person in a three-piece business suit in a high-rise building in Manhattan can swallow and not think that they're getting religion or any of this God stuff, right? But it's spiritual principle at its heart. I was thinking more deeply about this just yesterday and thinking in so many ways it is like the Bodhisattva path in Buddhism. The Bodhisattva path, the path that is grounded in compassion and in wisdom and in the use of skillful means. The Bodhisattva path that is about compassion that sees the suffering in the world and wants to do what he or she can to alleviate that suffering. The wisdom that really tries to understand the nature of reality and the interconnectedness of life, and therefore moves forward out of that wisdom. And the skillful means to use whatever methods, whether it's teaching or direct support, to help alleviate suffering, to help not only the individual, but to help the collective. Is that not the same in a way as win-win? Win-win. Covey suggests that there are 3 traits essential to win-win. And he lists the 3 traits as these: integrity, maturity, and abundance mentality. Think about that for a moment. Win-win. Think about integrity. Think about maturity. Think about abundance mentality. Traits that he says are essential to really embody, not just use the language of, let's go for win-win, but really to come from a mindset and a heart set of mutual benefit, of collaboration, of collective good, of common good. Integrity, maturity, abundance mentality. Integrity, you know what it is. It's to be trustworthy. It's to be honest. It's to make commitments and to keep those commitments. It's one of the things that, and I don't know if this just happens when you get older or if we really are seeing the dynamics of our social structures changing, but it seems to me that commitments and following through on one's word are much weaker now than I remember them being when I began this work. And quite honestly, that concerns me as a person, as a teacher, as a mother, because we can't create a society, we can't create families that work well or businesses that work well if our word doesn't mean anything. Now, we may make a commitment that we then have to change because we find that we just can't keep it. But then the right action is to do what? To acknowledge, I made this commitment. I said I was going to do this at this time. I said I was going to show up in this way. And you know what? Maybe I spoke too soon, or you know what? Something else has happened that really is keeping me from being able to make that commitment, and I want you to know that I'm aware that I'm breaking that commitment. I appreciate that Covey really brings us down to very simple, basic things and says if we can't keep our word and our commitment on the simple stuff, we're going to have a hard time doing it on the big stuff. And it's at the heart of being a person that is a person of integrity. And that's why I think he says it's one of the traits essential in being able to embody this philosophy of win-win. Maturity, I like what he teaches about this. He says that maturity is a balance between courage and consideration. Think about that for a moment. Maturity is a balance between courage and consideration. He wrote, if a person can express his feelings and convictions with courage, balanced with consideration for the feelings and convictions of another person, he is mature. particularly if the issue is very important to both parties. The balance between courage and consideration. He goes on further and he says, some of the other ways that we describe this balance is ego strength or empathy balance, self-confident or respect for others balance, or in transactional analysis terms, I'm okay, you're okay. He further explains that if you're high on courage and low on consideration, you'll have the conviction, the energy of your convictions, and you won't be at all holding back expressing them, but you won't be very considerate of the other person's point of view. And if it's in a work situation or in a family dynamic where you're the parent, he says you might very well use your position of authority to exert even more influence over the other if you are high on courage, but low on consideration. And if you're low on consideration and high on courage, you'll really pay attention to what the other person is needing or wanting, but you won't show up authentically and speak to what it is that you need, what it is that you want. Does this make sense? And the maturity is about the balance of those. And it requires self-awareness, doesn't it? It requires kind of checking in and noticing, how are we showing up in our primary relationships, in our relationships with kids, with peers, with our coworkers? And then the third trait he said was the abundance mentality. And to me, that is so unity, isn't it? So science of mind, if that's unity is my tradition, but I know many of us have been in both teachings. The abundance mentality, which basically says there is really more than enough to go around. I moderate that just a little bit with the wisdom of Mahatma Gandhi, who said there is more than enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. I really believe that one of the most serious ills in our society today is greed. Corporate greed, individual greed. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation for another lesson. But abundance mentality, that we are willing to stay in the conversation with the other longer and deeper to really find some sort of answer or some sort of solution that is mutually beneficial. Conversations that are difficult take skill, time. Conversations and relationships that are problematic take, I think, the embodiment of a philosophy and a mindset that says, I'm in this for the long haul. I care. I need to use my voice, but I also need to hear yours. And I believe that there is a way for us to come together and find something that really works to the benefit of both of us. And let's stay in the conversation and in the relationship long enough and skillfully enough with enough heart, enough patience, and enough compassion to try to find that together. And if after really deeply and honestly and maturely trying to find that together, we discover that we can't, then it's okay to say, in Covey's language, no deal. So I invite you to, as you think about some of the things I've shared with you this morning from his book, 7 Habits, some ways to practice. Maybe there is an upcoming interaction that you have at work or a difficult conversation you need to have with a family member. Take a check in with yourself and just kind of play in your mind. How can you approach this from the highest, most collaborative win-win mentality? And just sit with that for a little bit. Or maybe a way to practice is to begin to really notice your own scripting. Are you scripted, much like our culture has scripted us, that it is either win or lose? Just notice, how are you scripted? So the next time something difficult comes up, a problem or a challenge in a relationship, just take stock, not in a judgmental way, but in an honest and as objective way as you can, to notice, Are you coming from a mindset of win-win? Are you coming from win-lose? Are you coming from lose-win, where you're willing to give up? But remember, if it's not good for you, it ultimately can't be good for the whole. So I hope that you'll take a look and ponder some of these ideas a little more deeply, because they have such deep spiritual implications in our life, and I think can go a long, long way to helping us improve our relationships, our personal relationships, and our work relationships, as well as our community relationships. Namaste.